He was just a few blocks from home, the wipers swiping steady against the drizzle when the red and blue lights hit his mirror. Jonathan Reed, 52 years old, head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, had spent his whole day locked in briefings that chewed through his patience and his nerves. He'd turned down his protective detail because all he wanted was 10 quiet minutes alone, driving through a neighborhood where he was still the new face. He'd worked 3 decades for this moment, climbing from prosecutor to special agent to director. Yet as those lights flashed behind him, he felt the same pit in his stomach he'd carried since he was a boy, watching his father slammed against a squad car for no reason at all. He pulled over by the curb, hands on the wheel where everyone could see. The officer coming toward him had that square jaw, military buzz cut, the swagger of a man who believed the badge made him invincible. "License and registration." The officer barked, flashlight, stabbing straight into Jonathan's eyes. Jonathan kept his tone calm, steady, professional. "Good evening, officer. May I ask the reason for the stop? Suspicious vehicle in the neighborhood?" The cop shot back, already resting his palm on the holster. Jonathan moved deliberately, announcing every action like a training tape. "I'm reaching into my jacket for my wallet." Slowly. Nothing else. He pulled out his driver's license and the leather case that carried his FBI credentials, sliding them both out with practiced precision. The officer looked at the badge, then laughed under his breath. "Right, and I'm the president." His voice dripped with disbelief. Jonathan's jaw clenched, but his eyes stayed calm. "You can call your dispatcher and confirm. I am Jonathan Reed, director of the FBI." "Step out of the car," the officer snapped, unclipping the holster. Jonathan felt the weight of every camera phone clicking on from nearby porches. Neighbors in pajamas were leaning out, whispering. A man in a tailored suit, black, being treated like a criminal on the sidewalk of his own neighborhood. He stepped out, hands raised. "I'm unarmed. I am complying. Turn around." Hands on the vehicle. The cold steel of his Audi pressed into his palms, rain soaking through his jacket. A gun barrel stayed fixed on his back. And in that moment, the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the country was just another black man accused of not belonging. 5 minutes dragged like an hour until a second cruiser screeched in. A sergeant jumped out, eyes widening instantly. "Officer Collins, stand down now." His voice cracked sharp, commanding. Collins hesitated, knuckles white on the pistol grip. He matches the suspect description, and he flashed suspicious ID. "I said holster your weapon." The sergeant moved between them, chest out. "That's Director Reed. Do you understand what you've done?" Phones were raised high now, red lights blinking. The cop's face burned red as he slowly lowered his weapon, but the damage was done. By sunrise, the clip was everywhere, FBI director held at gunpoint in his own neighborhood. Jonathan went home that night, his wife Elena pacing the kitchen with fury in her eyes. "They could have killed you if that sergeant hadn't shown up." "But he did," Jonathan said softly, though his voice betrayed the tremor beneath. His teenage son Aaron slammed his phone on the counter. "Everybody at school's talking about it. Dad, they're saying you faked it, that you were somewhere you shouldn't have been." Jonathan's heart sank deeper. The boy's voice cracked with something he hadn't shared before. "Last month, walking home from practice, a patrol car followed me 6 blocks. Didn't do anything, just crept behind me. I thought I was paranoid, but now..." He looked away, ashamed of the fear. Jonathan reached across his hand, heavy on his son's shoulder. "You should have told me. Son, this is why the work matters." But Aaron's eyes blazed. "Does it? You're the director of the FBI and they still put a gun to your head. What chance do the rest of us have?" Jonathan couldn't answer. By morning, it wasn't just a neighborhood scandal. The Attorney General called an emergency meeting at dawn. Senior staff sat stone-faced as the viral clip looped across the wall. The president himself phoned twice, worried about political fallout. And while commentators split along familiar lines, some asking what Jonathan was doing in that neighborhood, so late others calling it proof of systemic rot, the truth started seeping out. Collins, the officer who'd pulled him over, had a personnel file thicker than a phone book, 14 complaints, 9 involving excessive force against minorities. None had ever gone anywhere. And cyber forensics showed he wasn't just careless. He belonged to a private group online, trading racist jokes, boasting about targeting black drivers. Jonathan stared at the evidence in silence. The same patterns he'd sworn to dismantle as a young prosecutor were still alive, now staring him down with a service weapon in his own driveway. Then came the turn that made his blood run colder. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera showed Collins's patrol car tailing him for nearly 2 miles before the stop. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. When Jonathan confronted his deputy Maya Torres about expanding the probe, she lowered her voice. It gets worse. The dashcam footage from Collins's cruiser timestamped wrong. Someone altered it hours after the stop. Jonathan knew then this wasn't one bad cop. This was a network. Within days, the investigation pulled up connections stretching across jurisdictions. Officers on private message boards called themselves sentinels, swapping tips on preserving community character. A sanitized phrase for harassing black families out of affluent neighborhoods. Elena, fierce as ever, fought her own war. A civil rights attorney, she stood in their kitchen one night, eyes burning. They recruited Collins because he was angry and broken, then fed him hate until he aimed it at you. If they can reach into our home, into our children's lives, what chance does anyone else have? Jonathan kept his composure. In public press conferences, Senate hearings, sober statements about equal justice, but inside he carried a storm. Every time he saw his son's slumped shoulders, his daughter's silence, he knew the cameras had only captured a fraction of what black families endured unseen. The backlash was vicious. Police unions called him a political hack. Pundits painted him as playing the race card to boost FBI funding. Anonymous letters arrived at Elena's office with photos of their house, the children's school. They weren't just trying to discredit him, they were trying to break him. And then the unthinkable. Collins, the officer who could have exposed the conspiracy, turned up dead in his holding cell, ruled a suicide. But the marks didn't match. The cameras glitched for 7 minutes. A needle mark at the base of the skull, easy to miss. Jonathan saw it for what it was, murder disguised to look convenient. Someone was silencing witnesses. At that moment, Jonathan faced a choice. Using his power to retaliate, quickly fire everyone, storm into press conferences with rage, or play the long game. Patient, methodical, by the book, even when the book felt like a cage. He chose patience. He built a task force of agents he trusted with his life. They dug deeper, pulling threads until the tapestry of corruption began to unravel. A captain in Baltimore, a union boss in Atlanta, financial ties reaching into corporate boardrooms and even the halls of Congress. The network wasn't about one cop with a gun on a rainy night. It was about power, who gets to live, where who gets to feel safe, who gets to belong. The pressure nearly tore his family apart. Aaron accused him of cowardice, of hiding behind procedures. "What's the point of all this power?" the boy yelled one night, "if you won't use it to protect us?" Jonathan looked at him, eyes heavy with years. "Because if I use it wrong, son, I'm no better than the men who pulled that gun on me." The boy didn't answer, but months later he'd understand. When the indictments dropped, they were historic: 70 officers across 12 states. A network exposed, documented, undeniable. Congress named the reform bill after the city where it all began, the Brookdale Accountability Act. Training oversight, real consequences for tampering with cameras or files. For the first time in years, Jonathan felt the weight shift, if only slightly, toward justice. At the ceremony where the president pinned a medal to his lapel, Jonathan thought not of the cameras, not of the applause, but of that night, the rain, the gun, the way Collins's eyes had looked through him like he was invisible. Later, driving through the same street where it all began, he slowed as a new family unloaded boxes into a colonial house. A black father looked up, recognition sparking in his eyes. He lifted a hand in greeting. Jonathan returned it, a small wave, heavy with meaning. The patrol car rolling past carried 2 officers, one white, one black, both nodding at him. A fragile sign of change, imperfect but real. And here's the question that lingers long after the medals and the speeches fade. If the head of the FBI can be pinned to his own car, treated like a suspect in his own neighborhood, what does that say about the millions of people without cameras, without titles, without a badge to protect them? What would you have done in Jonathan's shoes, lashed out for revenge, or fought patiently to expose the system behind the man with the gun? Comment below with your take, because this isn't just his story, it's America's story. Hit that like button if you believe justice means more than punishment, and subscribe for the next chapter, where we dig even deeper into how power and prejudice collide in ways most people never see. Because in the end, justice doesn't come in one dramatic moment. It comes in the daily fight to make sure the next man, the next kid doesn't have to raise his hands on his own street just to survive. She was just a few blocks from home,